Everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we are diving into IBDP ESS topic 2.3, which focuses on biogeochemical cycles. We will be exploring how essential elements move through ecosystems and the vital processes that keep these systems in balance. So, let's get right into it. So, this topic, as far as your exams are concerned, are important because here there are some questions which are repetitively asked in the previous IB exams, and the most common question is about the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle and how human activity impacts this cycle. And sometimes in past paper question they have also asked you to draw the cycle. Okay, so there is this particular style, or there is this few points which you need to keep in mind while drawing a carbon cycle and nitrogen cycle. So we all will be discussing that thing in this video. So first let's understand what is this biogeochemical cycle. So the cycle is basically describes us that how the chemical elements such as carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus move through biotic and abiotic components of an ecosystem. Okay, but why it is important that this cycle should run? It's because that every living organism requires these elements, and because of this cycle, uh, the transfer of the elements takes place and it becomes available to the living organism. So here in this subtopic, when we are understanding different concepts, we will also explore these guiding questions, that how the cycle runs through an ecosystem, what are the factors which will disrupt this natural cycle, and what will happen if this cycle gets disrupted. So it is important that these elements uh, you know be available to the living organism. So there is always this exchange of matter which is taking place, right? So why do elements need to cycle? Because earth is a closed system. Okay, and when we say closed system, that means there is this exchange of energy but not matter. So very little new matter enters or leaves. Okay, so we have a limited amount of elements present in the earth, right? And that's why it is important that the biogeochemical cycles runs, because that will ensure that all the elements continue to be available to the living organisms. So we have a limited supply of elements, and without cycling, these elements would become locked up and unavailable, and that's why the cycles ensure that elements move between the living and the non-living components. And as the name suggests, bio means living, geo means earth, and chemical means element. So the cycling of chemical elements through living organism and the earth system is known as biogeochemical cycle. Now there are three important things which you need to understand. First is storage, second is sink, and third is source. What is storage? The name itself says that it is the place where the element is held for a short period of time. Okay, now if we talk about the storages for carbon cycle, we can say that in atmosphere carbon is present, in ocean it is present, in fossil fuels they are present, in biomass they are present, right? Sink is something where the a store that is absorbing more than it releases. So it's a place where the element is absorbed more than it releases. So there is this net uptake which is happening. Like if we talk about ocean, we know ocean absorbs more carbon dioxide than they release. So then that ocean becomes the sink for carbon. And when I say source, store is it's a place where the element is releasing more than it absorbs. So it's a source of something. It's where the element is coming. Like when you burn a fossil fuel, then it releases more carbon dioxide than it's stored. So now it's not like that this is going to remain same forever, right? It changes. Okay, so a store can be a sink at one time and it can be a source at another. So it depends on the balance of inputs and outputs. For example, a forest is a carbon sink while growing, but can become a carbon source when burned. So depending upon the situation, this changes. So when you talk about carbon stores, organic carbon stores, and then we have an inorganic carbon store. So organic is where carbon is present in living organism, right? That is biosphere, fossil fuel, and dead organic matter. And carbon is present as an inorganic component in atmosphere, oceans, soils, and rocks in form of various salts such as calcium carbonate, dissolved carbon dioxide, bicarbonates, and carbonates. So this is the inorganic carbon stores. Now, an important thing in this chapter is understanding the carbon cycle. And in exam, you may ask to draw the carbon cycle. There are few things which you need to keep in mind, and that is that whenever you are writing or whenever you are drawing a carbon cycle, just make sure that you put the storages in boxes. So wherever the storages are present, okay, that you need to keep it in a box. And you need to draw the carbon cycle with pencil. No pen should be used. And to make it easier, always starts with ocean, because once you write ocean, the drawing a carbon cycle becomes easy. So ocean, we know that it is sometimes can be act as a starting point, so that makes your uh, drawing a carbon cycle make it easier. Okay, so in atmosphere, and if it is in this ocean, like, so here it starts with atmosphere. First of all, you need to remember this main thing. Okay, so atmosphere, producers, consumers, decomposers. Okay, so we have the processes, different processes. Okay, like photosynthesis, feeding, defecation, respiration, and death. Okay, so what is happening here? The very first thing is that there is this exchange of gases. So carbon dioxide is something absorbed by the ocean. Okay, and that carbon dioxide helps in doing the photosynthesis. So it is absorbed by the ocean also. It is also absorbed by plants, terrestrial plants. In ocean there are many phytoplanktons and marine life, so there they will do the process of photosynthesis and respiration, and there is this exchange happens between ocean and atmosphere. And in terrestrial also this exchange happens. So the plants will do the process of photosynthesis. It will be then feed by the animals will do the process of respiration, and then they will release the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. When you burn fossil fuels, again that carbon dioxide is releasing, but when you see how it is forming, so we know that these are all fossil fuels which are formed in as a lithosphere, and it takes thousands of years. So whatever the remains of carbon is there, and whenever the phytoplankton, zooplanktons, and all the animals gets die, they get sedimented into the ocean bottom. And once the, like, 100 years, 1000 years after, so many years, this organic carbon is forming the sea floor sediment, and from where the fossil fuels are forming, and it is again, when you burn it, it again the stored carbon released into the atmosphere. So that's the cycle. So just remember, during the process of decomposition also, the dead organic carbon get enter into the soil, and from soil it again enter into the atmosphere. So the natural sequestration means something which is happening naturally, like photosynthesis, where the plant captures CO2, get converted into biomass, ocean absorbs carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater. Soil organic matter, the decomposition stores carbon in soil, and whenever the rock weathering occurs, again this carbon dioxide reacts with minerals. Artificial sequestration means the technologies which people are using it to decrease the carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere. So this one of the technique is this carbon capture and storage technique, which is useful for capturing the atmospheric carbon dioxide. There is this another direct air capture technology, which is a kind of a machine which pulls the carbon dioxide from air. These are the another techniques which we are using to um, decrease the carbon dioxide, because we know that if there are more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, that can increase the global temperature, and that we don't want. So bioenergy with carbon capture and storage is also another technique, and afforestation is where we plant trees, because if you plant more trees, they will absorb more carbon dioxide naturally. So these are the few techniques. Now, ecosystem can also act as a store, sinks, and so or sources of carbon. Like healthy forest can act as a sink, because we know that growth absorbs more carbon dioxide than respiration releases. But when you burn the forest, it will act as a source, because it will release the carbon which is stored. Open ocean can be a sink, because phytoplanktons are present and dissolution of the absorbed carbon dioxide will happen. So it will accumulate the carbon. Wetlands can be called as a store, because waterlogged conditions such as present in mangroves and uh, swamps and marshes, there it will decrease the decomposition process. Agricultural land can also be act as a source often, because tilling, which is the process, releases soil carbon, and monoculture reduces storage. So whether an ecosystem is a sink or source depends on the balance of photosynthesis or respiration and decomposition, because human activities can also flip a sink into a source. Fossil fuel are a stores of carbon with unlimited residence time, because they are formed when ecosystem acted on carbon sink in past eras and become carbon source when burned. So when it takes thousands of years to form a coal, right? So coal is basically formed from a decomposed terrestrial plants, and it takes around millions of years. Oil is formed from marine organism. Natural gas are formed alongside oil from organic matter. Residence time effectively infinite until exceeded and burned. So these are the ancient carbon stores. So fossil fuel act as an ancient carbon stores. Now, how an agricultural system can act as a carbon stores, sources, and sinks. Now, again, it depends on the technique used. Like if you talk about the agroforestry, where you grow trees and crops, then there would be a more biomass. So, in that case, it's a storage. When you talk about no-till farming, then in that case the soil carbon preserved. When you have covered your soil with the crops, then there is this continuous photosynthesis which is happening, and that will absorb carbon dioxide. And when you do the process of composting, all the organic matter are added to the soil. So these all techniques can be a useful for a carbon sink, but carbon sources, because of all these practices, it can also act as a carbon source. We don't want more carbon source, so that's why this is a bad practices. Like tilling will expose soil carbon to oxidation, and carbon dioxide is releasing. When you're doing deforestation, again we are actually decreasing the carbon store sink, right? rice paddy field. If you see the agriculture of rice, you will see that there is all an anaerobic respiration which is happening because it's always underwater. So there is this presence of anaerobic bacteria which will do the process of respiration, and they will release methane in large amount. And methane is one of the uh, greenhouse gas, so that will again increase the global temperature. Livestock farming is also not that good practice because again it will release the methane in high concentration. So ocean and carbon dioxide is absorbed into the ocean by dissolving and is released as a gas when it comes out as a solution. So how ocean absorb carbon dioxide? So cold water absorbs more than warm water. Phytoplanktons take up the carbon dioxide. They will do the process of photosynthesis, and about 30% of human carbon dioxide emissions is absorbed by the ocean. So ocean, and if ocean temperature rises, water holds less because warm water has a less capacity to hold water. So it reduces the absorption capacity, and because of that it will like more carbon dioxide remain in the atmosphere, and that will increase the temperature. So this is a kind of a positive feedback loop which is forming. So this is the equation which they have shown, that how the ocean acidity is increasing. So when carbon dioxide combines with water, okay, there is this carbonic acid which is forming, and this will get broken down into bicarbonates, and the H plus ion is forming. So that will decrease the pH, and it makes the ocean more acidic. So this is the equation for ocean acidification. So why it is not good? Because it will affect the corals, molluscas, planktons, and fish. And it will largely affects corals because it will result into a coral bleaching where they will lose their colors. You have seen there is so much coral bleaching going on in Australia. It's a major tourist place for coral reefs, and because of that the decoloration is happening, and it is affecting the marine biodiversity. So it's extremely difficult to reverse, and that's why we don't want our oceans to get more acidic. So what alleviating human impacts, like how it impacts the carbon cycle? When you reduce emissions, okay, it's a very big thing. You need to reduce your emissions, and that's why need to adapt to the electric vehicles and renewable source of energy. You have to use the techniques which can absorb more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. You need to stop deforestation. You need to reforest your trees and everything, and you need to change your agriculture method to increase the absorption so that there is this less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So in exam generally they always ask you to ask this type of question, like what kind of measures you can take, or what kind of strategies can help in mitigating the human activity impact. So if this such kind of questions are coming, just elaborate it, provide more and more specific examples, use ESS subject specific terminologies. In HL content, it's all about how carbon in the lithosphere is important. So coal is forming from terrestrial plants, oil, marine organism buried in sedimentary rock, natural gas is formed with oil from organic matter under pressure, and it takes millions of years. Limestone, again, it's the largest inorganic carbon store, formed from accumulated shells and coral skeletons. Weathering slowly releases carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere, and residence time is hundreds of millions of years. So, this is about the carbon and how So, reef building corals and molluscs have hard parts that contain calcium carbonate that can become fossilized into limestone. So, how the limestone is forming and how limestone weathering is a natural carbon sink because it slows the absorption of atmospheric carbon dioxide, but this process operates over millions of years, far too slow to offset the current human emissions. So, that's why we need to adopt to the technology. So these are the things which they are explaining, that how limestone is forming. So when corals and molluscs which are present in the oceans gets die, they sink, and that sediments gets accumulated, and over millions of years of compression they will lastly form the limestone. So that's how they form. How coal formation occurs? So, when terrestrial plants in swamp forests die, waterlogged conditions prevent full decomposition. So, layers and layers gets accumulated, peat formation occurs, and gradually the coal will form. So, it will take around millions of years under heat and pressure to form a coal, and we are getting runoff from it. So, it's very important that you control your fossil fuel usage. Oil and gas formation happens when it's from the planktons. So when algae die and sink, it is buried in ocean sediment. It is compressed, and oil and gas are forming. So migrate through porous rock, and it's trapped in a reservoirs. Methane is produced from dead organic matter in an anaerobic condition by methanogenic bacteria, as I've said earlier. In rice paddy field, it is the major agricultural source. Okay, so it is environmentally not sustainable to grow a rice paddy field. In wetlands, also, there is this largest natural source of methane. When there is, when we are doing this cattle grazing and everything, cattle itself releases large amount of methane. Landfill, again, responsible for the methane release. Permafrost. So what are permafrost? It's a frozen soil. Okay, so when it gets melt, when the temperature increases, again it will release the greenhouse gases which was stored in that area for a very long time. So when temperature rises, the permafrost melts, and it will release the trapped gases into the atmosphere, and it will further increase the temperature. So that's a kind of a positive feedback loop. And methane is even more potent compared to carbon dioxide, because methane remains in an atmosphere for a longer period of time. Coming to the nitrogen cycle, here we have to talk about how the nitrogen fixation happens. So basically, nitrogen fixation is the process which is done by nitrogen fixing bacteria, which are specifically present in the root nodules of leguminous plants specifically. So this rhizobium bacteria converts the atmospheric nitrogen into ammonia. Okay, uh, and that process is not possible without nitrogen fixing bacteria. We call it as nitrogen fixers. One of the example is rhizobium bacteria. Now these ammonium gets converted into nitrites and nitrates by another class of bacteria which are known as nitrosomonas. So this is how nitrates and nitrites are formed, and this is absorbed by the plants. And then we have another class of bacteria called denitrifying bacteria, which will convert this nitrates into an atmospheric nitrogen again. So this is how the cycle continues, and it provides the nitrogen for the plants, because plants doesn't have a capacity to absorb atmospheric nitrogen directly. It's only the bacteria which has the capacity. Or the another way is that lightning. So through lightning also some of the atmospheric nitrogen gets fixed. Okay, so this is how nitrogen fixation happens. There is this industrial process also which can fix the atmospheric nitrogen. So this is the summary, like nitrogen fixing bacteria convert nitrogen into ammonia, nitrifying bacteria converts it into a nitrates and nitrites, and then decomposing bacteria convert an organic nitrogen into an ammonia, and then again the further denitrifying bacteria will convert it into an atmospheric nitrogen. So denitrification happens only in anaerobic condition when the water is logged. So again, this is the when you do over irrigation, it can increase the denitrification. Because plants cannot fix nitrogen, okay, so it's unavailable to them. So nitrogen fixing bacteria is very, very important. Examples include cyanobacteria, azotobacter, and the lightning process. So these are the summary of the nitrogen cycle, how it happens. And what are the impacts of nitrogen cycle? So when agriculture, deforestation, aquaculture, urbanization process occurs, it will increase the nitrogen level in the atmosphere. So when fertilizers we are using, it will increase the reactive nitrogen in soils and waterways. Deforestation will remove vegetation and that would take up nitrogen which is accumulating in soil. Aquaculture release ammonia. Urbanization again release the reactive nitrogen, and when you burn fossil fuel, it can result into the production of nitrogen oxide, which results in the formation of acid rain and smog. These are the industrial process which can produce ammonia from nitrogen and hydrogen for use as fertilizer. And the another understanding is about the nitrogen planetary boundary, which increases the nitrates in the biosphere. So this planetary boundary topic is there in every chapter. So you need to connect the concept whatever asked with the planetary boundary. So you need to mention in that way that how or what processes specifically allows this boundary to get crossed. Okay, so when the eutrophication happens, that will increase the we know that eutrophication results into the formation of dead zones. Okay, so that is not good for the environment, right? So this will is responsible for the boundary to crossed, and it make the things worse, and it will not allow so it's not a reversible process, right? It is an irreversible loss which is happening. So it is on in the in it's it should be it, humans should be able to fix more nitrogen industry. Okay, so that's how it impacts, and that's why we need to do agriculture with a precision. We should focus on organic farming, and we should coordinate with the international and national agreements which are there, which can specifically target for nitrogen reduction. We need to adapt to the strategies such as crop rotation. We need to cover crops every time. We should never keep soil as it is. It should always be covered so that the losses will not happen. These are few of the essential terminologies which you should use when you are writing your answer. Yeah, so thank you everyone. We'll meet with the another topic in the next class.